Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. My name is Ishrat Nazmi. I'm a procurement specialist with the Connecticut Apex Accelerator, or CT Apex. Welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity Awareness, Navigating CMMC and NIST SP 800-171 Compliance with Project Spectrum. CT Apex Accelerator is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense. Matching funds are provided by Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Our host agency is Southeastern Connecticut Enterprise Region, or sector. During these presentations, all attendees are muted and your questions will be answered at the end of this webinar. The session material will be emailed to you after the presentations. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so be sure to submit your questions in the Q&A box. Connecticut Apex provide educational resource and training to simplify the complexities of government contracting for our clients. We offer assistance with federal, state, and local government registrations and certifications, including various socioeconomic certifications at both the federal and state level. Connecticut Apex provides support to clients in the following areas: market research with procurement history, identifying bid opportunities, preparing bid proposal, one-on-one personalized counseling, creating government-friendly capability statements, and bid matching service at no cost. Connecticut Apex has 5 office locations throughout Connecticut, which includes Hartford, East Hartford, Rocky Hill, Milford, and our headquarters in Groton, Connecticut. Connect with us at CT Apex on social media platforms, including Facebook and LinkedIn. In addition to registering online at ctptag.org, where you can sign up for government contracting assistance and also access our learning library for various webinars on a variety of topics in regards to government contracting. Today's webinar promises to be an insightful and engaging one. We will discuss cybersecurity threat landscape, understanding federal contract information, FCI, and contract and controlled unclassified information, CUI data, foreign ownership, control, or influence, FOCI, CMMC, cybersecurity maturity model, process overview, project spectrum supports, and Q&A at the end. I am thrilled to introduce you our presenter, Mr. Karim A. Sykes. Mr. Sykes currently serves as the program manager for Project Spectrum, a U.S. Department of Defense recognized cybersecurity awareness initiatives that offer resource, training, and tools toward increasing cybersecurity awareness and hygiene for small business in particular. Mr. Sykes provides strategic leadership for a dynamic team of cybersecurity and outreach professionals whose collective aim centers around providing educational resource and tools small business and institutions needs to develop, implement, and maintain cybersecurity compliance. He oversees and directs the daily execution of multiple projects within the large-scale programs and assures the initiatives adheres to government regulatory guidance. Mr. Sykes also manages contractual requirements to assure that Project Spectrum meets the cost, schedule, and performance goals required by the DoD Office of Small Business Programs, OSBP. So please join me in extending a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Karim Sykes. Welcome, Mr. Sykes.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you so much, Isra, for the warm welcome. And again, as always, a pleasure. Happy to be here. And, I just want to point out, you refer to yourself as a procurement specialist, but it's really procurement specialist extraordinaire. So we're always excited about working with you guys at the Connecticut Apex Accelerator and really the other 96 Apex Accelerators nationwide. Very, very excited to be here. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And we'll jump right into some slides here. Bear with me just a second. There we go. All right, and you guys can tell me if you're able to see that.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Well, again, they're just, as always, it seems like every time we talk about Project Spectrum and where we are in the current sort of cyber threat environment and why this is so important and germane for small businesses, it just doesn't seem to we just doesn't seem we don't seem to miss the point of it just being so apropos, right? I just did a briefing at Booz Allen Hamilton there yesterday, talking with some of the DoD CIO, which, as you all know, is the overarching governing agency within the DoD for the CMMC program. And I can tell you that from that briefing, Honorable John Sherman there, the DoD CIO himself, as well as his deputy, Mr. David McEwen, on hand as well, and really gave some engaging advice to the audience. But one of the things that stood out to me, which is why I even mentioned that, is that he talked about Honorable Sherman talked about this idea that sometimes we can get so lost in this compliance requirements, and we can become so frustrated as industry at the fact that there's so many requirements and the DFARS and CMMC and all these levels and all these controls and these requirements, right? And but what I think he masterfully brought it back to was that the why, right? Why are we doing all of this, right? Why is this important? Why is this critical? And that is, this is all for the protection of our warfighter, right? The protection of the warfighter, and by extension, the protection of the country, right? And so when we really understand it through that lens and that context, that really gives us, I think, invaluable insight and resolve to meeting the challenges, no matter how cumbersome it might seem for us as industry and small businesses, but understanding the larger importance and the significance around why it is that we're doing what we're doing. And again, having said that, again, our focus at Project Spectrum is, again, as you see there, helping you understand your data and compliance obligations. But not just that, right? It's the education awareness piece, but it's also helping you navigate all of that, right? Helping you understand from the point of inception to the point that you register at projectspectrum.io, to the point that we've gotten you identified in terms of what your intended level of compliance is based on the types of contracts you're pursuing, and therefore what types of information you'll be handling, all the way through to helping you with those documentation pieces, right? The system security plan, the remediation plans, all of those pertinent aspects of helping you become compliant is exactly why we exist and why we thrive and why we are excited to be here talking with you today. And so I'm just going to talk initially about what you can expect, again, from this presentation. From an education perspective, we want to educate businesses not only on the landscape of cybersecurity threats, but we want to help them understand the federal regulations for safeguarding data and information. Again, educating them about the CMMC process, right? For the respective levels, 1, 2, or 3. Providing an overview on how Project Spectrum can actually help you with that cyber compliance journey as it relates to CMMC, which is, again, critical to what it is that we're doing and why we're here. So let's talk a little bit about the threat landscape. What we know in no uncertain terms is that more than 40% of all cyber attacks are targeting small businesses. And when you couple that with the fact that a mere 28% of small and medium-sized businesses have actually have plans in place to mitigate attacks, that in conjunction with the fact that just about 3/4 of all breaches are caused by human error, that confluence of statistics right there, just in those three, tell us in no uncertain terms that there are particular threat vectors aimed at small and medium-sized companies, that there are not enough of the companies within the defense industrial base and really beyond, that there are not enough companies that have preparatory measures in place, be it education, be it plans of how they're going to resolve should they be attacked, right? And then the third one there lends to this idea of education, right? If these breaches are being caused by human error, it's largely because they don't understand the various resources, for example, that Project Spectrum is provisioning to help them, if not alleviate, certainly mitigate the likelihood of them being compromised or their data being compromised or attacks happening. What we know in no uncertain terms, that fourth circle there from the left or second from the right, is that a cyber attack can cost as much as $650,000, one attack, right? That's crippling to many small businesses, as needless to say, and certainly for micro smalls, right? But again, we think about the fact that only 14% of small and medium-sized companies even are aware or have proper insurance or coverage, again, in the event that they are attacked, right? So a lot of companies don't even know that these things exist. These are products out there that obviously have a cost associated with them, but again are something that's available. So again, that education awareness piece, training and tools, as you can see, very, very evident just in those few statistics there. Why are small businesses being targeted? Well, again, we talk about intellectual property issues. We talk about access to sensitive government information. We talk about the interconnection with larger defense contractors. But these are all very, very critical and germane as to why it is that the small business community, particularly within the DIB, is a target-rich environment for would-be attackers, right? The fact that they have access to the supply chain, the fact that there are political and ideological motivations for why these companies are attacked, all main factors here. And so why do we focus then on understanding federal contract information and CUI, or controlled unclassified data? And we focus on that particularly because it is what will necessitate the requisite levels of compliance. So for example, if you know that your contract that you're pursuing is relegated to federal contract information, again, some examples there in the upper right, if you're dealing with org charts or process documentation, or contract performance reports, right? Or RFPs, RFIs, right? These are some common terms here as it relates to procurement. And contracts. Well, if that's what you're dealing with, then you're going to be focusing on level 1 of CMMC. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, FCI being a subset of CUI, right? Consistent with the DFARS clause, on the other hand, controlled unclassified information, as explicated in 252.204.712, again, lends to this idea of, security controls pursuant to federal laws, regulations, and policies. Again, still talking about unclassified information, but you can see some examples here. So, for example, if you're dealing with government proprietary business information, right, unclassified controlled technical information, or SBU, sensitive but unclassed information, FOUO is another common one I think many of us have seen. Those are all examples of CUI, right? And in that regard, we know we're going to be dealing with CMMC level 2 and quite possibly level 3, depending upon the criticality of the CUI that we're dealing with. So when we talk about, for example, foreign ownership, control, or influence, it's a logical follow-on from the data discussion in terms of what types of data we're handling, because it is oftentimes the case that while foreign investment in US-based companies is encouraged to some extent, if it helps grow a company and if the right delimiters, as I say, are in place, and the right and left delimiters are in place, then that can be a great thing. It's when, for example, as explicated in the FY 2023 NDAA on the third bullet there, Section 875, where it's talking about commercial due diligence tools, techniques, and processes. It's when those things are not in place, and these foreign ownership entities that seek to gain undue access to foreign ownership, control, and influence over a U.S.-based company, that's when trouble starts to arise, and there are concerns from a control perspective there of those entities. And so what we know, just for example, in the manufacturing sector, is some 50% of all espionage is happening in the manufacturing sector due to some sort of foreign ownership, control, and influence. right? So one of the things that Project Spectrum is doing to speak directly to this is we actually have an online training course that you can take that, again, is not only going to talk about the identification of foreign ownership, control, and influence, but it's going to talk about how you evaluate the impact of it, how do we reduce the risks associated with foreign ownership, control, and influence. So very, very key and critical piece there. So the CMMC model. So we know that we're looking at level 1 as being the foundational level, again, relegated to federal contract information storage, processing, or transmission, right? We talk about CMMC level 2 as being the advanced level, right? That's where we're dealing with CUI at either a prioritized and or non-prioritized acquisition data level. And that, again, is a distinction that the DoD will delineate either in the RFPs as they're released once CMMC becomes fully implemented. We'll see it there in the RFP. And otherwise, we encourage you always to, and for many, multiple reasons, we encourage small businesses to become very, very close with those procurement and contracting officers, right? Once a contract is actually administered, but before then, a procurement officer who's assigned to a particular RFP that you may be pursuing. We want to encourage to the greatest extent possible that you're building that strong relationship with them, not only so that you can understand the requisite level of, for example, CMMC compliance, but that you're building that relationship toward hopefully what will be a contractual endeavor between you and that particular agency and or contracting procurement person. And so the levels for CMMC, as you can see, sort of laid out here at the bottom there. Again, at level 1, we're talking about those 17 practices. Again, where FCI is what's being either stored, processed, or transmitted. We know that in those cases for level 1 that there's going to be a self-assessment that will suffice. Again, we have a whole blog that's dedicated to how it is that you can upload your score, that is your requirement as per the existing DFAR 7012 requirement, that in fact you can upload that score to the Supplier Performance Risk System, which is the repository for the DoD within the Procurement Integrated Enterprise Environment that is relegated to facilitating the handling and processing of, or storage rather, of each contractor's score information as it relates to the self-assessments, all right? So level 2, we know we're dealing with 110 practices there, consistent with NIST 800-171. And again, there's that bifurcation between CUI prioritized and CUI non-prioritized. And obviously that has implications from the assessment perspective. If in fact it is a prioritized acquisition, there would be the need to meet with what's called a C3 PAO, or Certified Third-Party Assessor Organization. You can find those at the cyberab.org. Again, the cyberab.org, that's the Cyber Accreditation Body's website. Within that marketplace tab on their website, you'll be able to find a list of C3 PAOs. And by the way, they are very rigorously trained before they get the distinction of being a C3 PAO. And as such, they can often be a wealth of information. So we encourage you all to certainly, if you know that you're at the level 2 and you believe you're going to be handling prioritized acquisition type data, that the C3 PAOs are who you would ultimately meet with to become certified. But it's that preparatory piece prior to that, right? You're just getting started. If you're not really sure where you are, we want you to register at projectspectrum.io so that we can walk you through, at no cost to you, by the way, right? Exactly what trainings you should be engaging in, what self-assessments you should be taking, what scoping assessments you should be taking, which we'll talk about it here in a little bit. But all of those things that are germane to your level of your compliance journey, right? We want to make sure that you're registered with us, that you're taking advantage of the no-cost trainings, the self-assessments, all the tools that we bring to bear at no cost to you, so that by the time you get to certification, which there would be a cost for that, right? That's the cost of doing business with the DoD. So you do have to, if you're at that level 2 in a prioritized acquisition, you will have to become certified at the level 2 vis-a-vis a C3 PAO, having done an assessment there. But you can do the practice work, the legwork, all the preparatory engagement with us at no cost, and that would otherwise come at an exorbitant cost were it not for Project Spectrum's partnership with the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs. Level 3, finally there, those 110 plus controls. CUI, again, at the highest priority programs. I think I learned yesterday that there's about 1,000 companies or so, give or take, out of all the DIB companies, about 1,000 or so that are at or seeking that level 3. So again, a relative minority, obviously, relative to the broad number of companies that are out there within the DIB. Seeking CMMC compliance. There's about 1,000 that'll be going for level 3, and those assessments will be held triennial, and they'll be government led. So they'll be handled by the Defense Cyber Assessment Center. Excuse me, the DIBCAT, the Defense Industrial Base Cyber Assessment Center. And so let's go a little bit further into the assessment requirements for CMMC level 1. So we know self-attestation suffices. So what does that mean? Well, there is no certification, if you will, for CMMC level 1, right? You're just going to take your self-assessment, and as long as that score meets the requirement, right? So it's out of 110 total, right? If you meet that requirement, you upload your score into the supplier performance risk system. Again, to be compliant, the contractor needs all findings, right, to result in either a met or a non-applicable status. Non-applicable in the case of you having looked at the scoping assessment and deemed that particular control or that reference is not relevant to your particular handling of information, what have you, that it's non-applicable. So it's either met or non-applicable. Third bullet there, self-assessments, again, must be submitted to the supplier performance risk system. When conducting those self-assessments, we know that, again, a CMMC certification is not going to be issued at this level. Why? Because self-attestation suffices. Meaning the self-assessment score being uploaded will show you as having met that requirement. Organizations can also register at Project Spectrum at absolutely no cost, again, to conduct these assessments and produce the requisite scores. And so as we talk about CMMC level 2, this is where, again, I talked about that non-prioritized versus prioritized acquisition. So what you'll find first and foremost here is that we're talking CUI, right? We're talking controlled and classified information. So we know we're at level 2 minimal, right? We could be at level 3, depending on, again, the criticality of that CUI that's being handled. But in this case, for the purposes of delineating between a non-prioritized acquisition versus a prioritized acquisition and the attending self-assessments, this sort of lays out what each of those courses would look like, right? So if it's a split A or non-prioritized acquisition, as the language goes, we know that you're going to have annual self-assessments. We know that you're going to be able to take advantage of a huge financial savings because you're not paying for you don't ultimately have to meet with a C3 PAO under a non-prioritized acquisition at level 2, right? Therefore, again, CMMC certification, just like in level 1, right, where you don't have a CMMC certification required, if a self-assessment suffices, meaning that you're in a non-prioritized acquisition, then yes, there will not be a CMMC certification issued for that. You will just have met the compliance by uploading that score into the supplier performance risk system. Split B, on the other hand, where it is in fact deemed a prioritized acquisition or handling of sensitive CUI data, that's going to be a triennial or every 3-year cycle assessment. And again, certification must be performed by a CMMC certified third-party assessor, or C3 PAO, as they're often referred to. Businesses, again, you're still going to be able to save tremendously, right? Because all that preparatory work with regard to tools, training, cyber advisory preparedness, which we'll talk a little bit about more here as well. You're going to get all of that preparatory engagement and preparatory work so that, again, by the time you get to the C3 PAO to go for your official certification, right, or assessment for certification, you will have already understood exactly where your gaps are. You will have done the gap analysis. Again, we're going to walk through that. But you will have done all this preparatory work so that by the time you get there, it's almost like you've already had the test before the test, so that by the time you actually get to the official exam, you're lock, stock, and barrel ready to go. Assuming you've implemented everything that needed to have been done based on what you will have discovered having gone through that preparatory engagement vis-a-vis projectspectrum.io. And so the assessments in the case of a split B prioritized case for CMMC level 2, you're going to then upload your assessment scores to the CMMC Enterprise Mission Assurance Support Services System, otherwise known as EMAS. So if you're meeting with the C3PAO, it's a prioritized acquisition. When you go for certification, you're going to upload that assessment score there to the EMAS system. All right. And then as it relates to CMMC level 3, which is again a triennial every 3-year cycle assessment or certification. We talked about this, that the Defense Industrial Base Cyber Assessment Center is going to be responsible for doing those assessments. That will be done by the DIBCAC, again every 3-year assessment cycle. And we actually do have that scoping guidance as it was just recently issued by the DoD CIO just recently here on 26th December, when they unleashed unveiled rather this proposed rule that is coming out. We'll talk more about that as well. Give me 1 second. My dog needs to go out here. I apologize. I'm by myself, so give me 2 seconds here. I'll be back in just a second.
No problem at all, Mr. Sykes. This has been a great presentation so far. I mean, such insightful information, such detailed information is so vital to being a government contractor in this the government contracting space. And you have explained every step of the way, so many informations that are so much needed for all of the government industrial base to understand, because this is really one of the fundamental aspect of being a government contractor. So I was just, filling some space as you.
Yes, I heard you.
So you
yes.
can continue.
No, it's great. It's great. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this is absolutely critical information, and also gives you guys a chance to sort of digest. I know that's a lot of information that I talked through just in that piece, going through the different levels of CMMC. And again, we're happy to field questions on that as well, for sure.
I must say that you explained in a very simple manner that we can digest.
Well, great. Thank you so much. That's one of the things that I'm really really proud of our team. Our comms folks are second to none. I mean, they really understand what's transpiring here, and they're able to, break this down to palatable terms. That's one of the benefits of Project Spectrum, is that you're getting folks that understand that there's consternation around a lot of this. The influx of information, right? Everything from the DFARS, and again, it just can seem like a quagmire of information. And so we really take pride in being able to sort of synthesize that to the greatest extent possible, so that, again, folks coming in at various levels, for example, in this case of CMC level 1, or maybe they're coming in at an advanced level, they're able to really understand and understand not only what the requirements are, but how it is that we can benefit them, right? And so what I have here is just a compliance scenario. Again, a process overview, right, for meeting CMMC level 1. This, I think, really does a good job of giving you an idea of how we envision your success when you register at projectspectrum.io. So it's step 1 on the far right there. It talks about, again, identifying or selecting the appropriate CMMC level. But really, before that, it's how do we even know what's the appropriate level? Well, again, as I mentioned before, we're going to look at what types of data are you handling? What types of contracts are you pursuing, right? And we can kind of get an idea from there. But we want to be specific. So we want to, again, touch with those procurement officers, touch with those folks that are issuing these RFPs. so that they are the people that are issuing it. They certainly know what level of compliance, or at least what types of information you would be handling in the execution of said procurement opportunities. And again, that also can be found even in the details of the procurement solicitation itself, right? So whether it's an invitation for bid, whether it is a RFP or request for quote, you should be able to glean some details about that. And if not, there should be a POC that you can reach out to do that. But once you've identified that, and again, we can help with some of that, right? Our cyber advisors are at the ready to be able to help you in many regards. But again, to the greatest extent possible, we want you all as small businesses coming into ProjectSpectrum.io on these journeys to leverage the resources on the site, right? We want this to be a situation where you can come in, you can select that appropriate level of compliance in step 1, you can conduct that scoping assessment at step 2, you can go through the self-assessment as a result of having gleaned from the scoping assessment there, what is in and out of bounds, right? So you know now what you're going to be assessed against. Okay. Then step 3, you're gonna take that self-assessment, right? From there, you're going to be able to know exactly where you stand relative to those controls pursuant to, in this case, CMC level 1, so 17 controls. You're going to be able to know of those 17, okay, where do I fall short? Where am I looking great, right? And so then you can do some gap analysis, right, at step 4 in the orange. And then you can move forward from there to being able to say, okay, now that I've identified where my gaps are, let me develop a remediation plan, right? So I know how to address those concerns where I'm falling short on certain controls. And then once I've done that, then I can move forward to implementing security controls. Then I can begin to prepare in step 7, some documentation and evidence to support the fact that in fact I am meeting these controls, right? Because again, that documentation is going to be critical, as in the case of if you're audited or down the road, right? We know that for example, the DCAA is going to make sure that that's the Defense Contract Audit Agency, right? That kind of governs a lot of whether or not you have documentation to support different things that you're doing. So that documentation is going to be absolutely critical, particularly with the heightened visibility of CMMC. At least, especially when it's actually finally implemented. Obviously, all this comes to bear then. But in step 8, finally, it's uploading that self-assessment score to the supplier performance risk system, right? So that whole continuum, those 8 steps, is really how we see your success flowing as you come into Project Spectrum. And again, we have cyber advisors who are at the ready to be able to support field questions that you may have, or maybe it's a question about the remediation plan. Maybe it's, certain controls that you have another question about. And then, by the way, on the self-assessment, what we've done for ease of use is we've created explainer videos, right? So that you can click on those explainer videos for particular questions, and it'll help kind of walk through what it's really saying. Some people get it a little bit better when it's, explained via a video. So we wanted to make sure we did that as well. And again, those cyber advisors are at the ready, which is just invaluable when we talk about all of this being at no cost to the user, right? So again, selecting that appropriate level, we talked about that. FCI and CUI, that delineation there between the two. Again, going to necessitate what level we're going for. In this case, level 1, we're talking about, you can see what that scoping assessment is going to look like. Again, it's going to ask you, for example, do you have any contracts that contain federal contract information protection requirements, right? You can answer yes or no. And if you don't know the answer to that question, well, it's for current contracts, so you would absolutely know the answer to that question, right? But again, if you walk through these questions in the scoping assessment, and it's going to tell you what then for your respective level here, in this case, level 1, it's going to tell you what's in and out of bounds for you in terms of what the assessment's going to entail, right? It's going to, in level 1, we know we're going to be focusing on federal contract information assets. It's going to cover 6 family domains or control families, as we like to call them. 51 questions total there, so you know what you're working with. Scoping for level 2, just for the purposes of distinction here, remember this whole scenario is about level 1, but just for the purpose of discussion, scoping for level 2 is going to contrast in that there are 14 control families, right? 14 family domains, 69 questions. So obviously a little more robust, and it makes sense, right? Because we're talking about controlled unclassified information, right? So another sort of notch up, if you will, from FCI, hence the level distinction within CMMC. But again, that you have to, in level 2, for example, produce a system security plan and plan of action and milestones, as opposed to level 1, that is not a requirement. Now, it's something that we highly encourage at level 1, but it is not required from a scoping perspective, right? And this, again, is guidance, by the way, in these scoping assessments. This is guidance that's handed down from DoD directly, right? So level 1, we're talking about step 3 for CMMC level 1. So here's kind of this is that explainer video I talked about. You see that screenshot there, AC 3.1.1. It gives you an idea, for example, for authorized access control. Well, what is that? You might say, well, what is that? Well, you can click that video and it'll give you a very, very clear, discernible idea of what that control is, what that means, right? So when it asks you, for example, do you limit system access to authorized users, processes, acting on behalf of authorized users and devices, you'll be able to answer that. You'll be able to understand the question first and subsequently be able to answer it intelligently, right? So it's, again, it's getting you through the box checker of, okay, I got to do this assessment. Okay, but it's more than that. We don't just want you to go through and check a bunch of answers. Be absolutely exemplary of what your true stance is, right? So we want you to answer honestly so that we can actually help you and we can find where the gaps are. Again, no cost assessment. It adheres to the FAR clause 52.204.21 and NIST 800-171, the overarching standard, right? NIST. The documentation is going to be created and updated for evidence. Again, to be compliant, you will need to, it will need to result in either a met or non-applicable status. You can inherit practice objectives from an external source or external provider. The 6 family domains or control families and 17 practices. Again, we talked about those. And again, that's the self-assessment. That's what's going to give you an idea of where you stand currently. So what is your existing infrastructure? What are the existing practices that you have in place versus what is actually required for that level of CMMC? And so from there, again, we talked about that gap analysis, right? So again, Project Spectrum is actually going to produce a findings report. This is what it'll look like to the right there. The scoring methodology, again, is used to produce that assessment score. And that scoring methodology, by the way, is wholly in tandem with the overarching authority there as it relates to the scoring methodology for CMMC assessments, and that is the Defense Contract Management Agency. So we've worked tirelessly with them to make sure that that score that's produced by our assessments is lock, stock, and barrel with what they have delineated as the requirement there. So what does that mean? That means that if you take our assessment and you upload that score, you can take that to the bank, so to speak, right? So again, you're going to be able to identify control gaps, right? Again, that report is going to either be not met or no status for those control gaps, right? Reviewing Project Spectrum's micro courses. And these are things that we offer that are very control specific, smaller courses, but are control specific. So if you find, for example, that there's an area of opportunity, as I like to call it, or a portion where you're not meeting a control, you're able to go and find that attending micro lesson that speaks to that control so that you know what exactly needs to happen in order for you to be compliant. That's invaluable. Again, aligning gaps with CMMC level 1 requirements. And as we talk about the development of a remediation plan, I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that word today. It is, again, this idea of a plan, right? And a document that's actually developed to address and rectify those security gaps, deficiencies, or vulnerabilities. Again, it's going to outline specific actions, resources, timelines, and steps that are necessary to close those gaps. Again, identify and prioritize, conduct risk assessment, set clear objectives, testing and validating. You can see everything there, very comprehensive in terms of what we're provisioning here on projectspectrum.io. We talk about the implementation of security controls, right? And that was, as you recall, right after step 5. So we're talking about step 6, implementing those security controls, right? Well, one of the things here that's critical, and as you can see not only the self-assessment guide there, but you can also see where you're going to be able to use CMMC assessment guides along with Project Spectrum self-assessment tool to be able to implement those controls. That means that we're not leaving any stone unturned here, right? If you're coming into our environment, you're going to be able to have all the tools you need to be able to identify where there are gaps and then correct those gaps, right? So that you are compliant. Again, part of learning and applying the DoD risk management, selecting the gaps of security controls, implementing and remediating each gap security control, collecting evidence, updating documentation, plans, policies, procedures, and processes. This is critical, and we understand the importance of it, and that's why we wanted to make sure we have the attending documentation for use by our constituency. And so we talk about, again, preparing that documentation and evidence. This just shows you, again, in a little bit more detail, right? That this area here, I can just highlight here. So that's the network topology, right? That's kind of looking at how is your network structured, right? Where are your routers, right? Where are your switches? Now that all may be confusing to you. Don't worry about that. We're going to walk you through a lot of what that means, but just know that we're setting up and helping you prepare documentation and evidence so that if in fact you're ever audited, if in fact it's ever needed, by the government, you're going to be able to have the documentation in place. We know the system security plan is going to be required at CMMC level 2, right? And 3 for that matter. We know that there's going to be an incident response plan, right? You'll want to have that. How are you responding to security incidents, right? And again, those cyber advisory services, I can't speak enough about them, really there to augment the sort of lean forward effort that we're really empowering small businesses to do when they come to our site. So we want you all to take advantage of that, lean forward, take the self-assessments, take the scoping assessments first, then the self-assessment, and then move through that process on your own. And if you have questions, we're there at the ready to be able to support, again, at no cost to you. And so then finally, again, uploading your assessment score to SPURS. Again, not the actual assessment. You're not uploading the assessment to SPURS, but you're uploading the score, as you can see there in this section here, right? So this is what it's going to look like when you go to the Supply Performance Risk System. We also have a blog on projectspectrum.io that spells out exactly what needs to happen there. And so finally, what are some of the resources we talked about here that Project Spectrum offers that really set us apart and make us unique? Not only have we been lockstep with the DoD on CMMC as it has evolved dramatically, frankly, over the last several years, but we are provisioning that education and awareness, frankly, first and foremost, of what it is that's coming down the pike as it relates to compliance requirements. So about that, we are going beyond that education awareness piece. We're providing the self-assessment toolkit, a cyber readiness dashboard, wherein you can bookmark various areas of your journey of the site, right? Whether it's maybe you visited the blog section, maybe you visited the certainly the self-assessment piece where you've taken those and you want to have those in a composite sort of window. So that if you step away, you can come back, you can see your progression of effort from one self-assessment to the next, again, invaluable. The Supply Performance Risk System score, you'll be able to see what your score is, the remediation plan template, the system security plans template, plan of action and milestones, being able to touch with the Apex counselor vis-a-vis the PowerPoint presentation that we have there on the site. The Project Spectrum instructional playbook, again, comprising many of these templates that we're talking about. Cybersecurity training and education, cybersecurity blogs, newsletters, and briefings. Again, a myriad of resources, all of which is at no cost to you as a user, which is just invaluable. I can't underscore that enough. As I attend various conferences and I build out these collaborations, whether it's with federal agencies, whether it's with small business development centers, whether it's with the manufacturing sector, the manufacturing innovation institutes, universities, academia, HBCUs around the country, one of the things that I see at these events invariably is that they'll have people that are providing some of the types of resources that we're providing, but they're charging many thousands of dollars for this, right? And so here's a situation where you have access to all these resources as a result of DoD, OSPP, and their investment in Project Spectrum. And so we want every small business around the country to take advantage. Register at projectspectrum.io, as you see there on your screen. Outreach at projectspectrum.io is the main means by which you can reach us. We're happy to help you along in your compliance journey. We're on social media, obviously at LinkedIn, Twitter, and we have a YouTube channel as well. Training webinars, we're going to be beefing those back up here very soon. We've been doing a lot in person, but we still recognize that there's an online presence that we want to maintain in terms of a lot of the CMMC trainings that we want to do there. And then we also want to continue with our cyber circuit events, and that's where we're bringing in industry professionals from within and around the defense industrial base to share best practices specifically for small businesses and medium-sized companies, but also all of the content on our site is germane to any business that's looking to secure their compliance journey, but most importantly, to increase their cyber hygiene and compliance. That's really where we're laser focused on, specifically on small and medium-sized companies. But again, if you have any questions, we're happy to field those. I do appreciate your time today. And if there's one thing I will leave you with, it is that readiness, resilience, and compliance is top of mind for Project Spectrum. We are in the process of going through the proposed rule that was issued on 26 December. As I said, there have already been some things that we've been able to glean from that. One of which is that the release again of the scoping guidance for CMMC level 3. So we'll be having that uploaded to our site very soon, and very excited about having all 3 levels delineated. And again, just really DoD CIO saying that, hey, we're moving this thing forward. We encourage everyone that's out there, if you have questions that you would like to submit, the public comment period, which is the next step in this process toward implementation, as explicated in that proposed rule. The public comment period ends on February the 26th. We want to make sure that you get out there and get your questions, have your voice heard. There's a mechanism by which to do that. You can go to the DoD CIO's page there, and you'll be able to see exactly how you can submit those public comments. But again, subsequent to that, we can look forward to the DoD CIO and their staff responding to those comments. Once that comment period window is closed on February 26th, they're going to start that process. It is a laborious process in terms of making sure they get all the responses and some of the process that they have to do on their end, which they're not able to talk much about at this point, and neither are we, frankly, as a result of being in this sort of period there procedurally. So what I would say is don't wait, right? This is coming. It is not an if, it is a when. Please register with us. Take advantage of the resources. They are truly, truly invaluable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes, so much for this presentations. And it's been a valuable presentations and information for our audience. And my takeaway from this presentation is that I have a better understanding of what tools and assessment Project Spectrum's .io offers, that we didn't have an understanding that all of these tools are offered at no cost. Connecticut Apex and Project Spectrums aligns with the same goal to assist small to mid-sized business understand and be aware of the cybersecurity threats that are out there and all of the requirements the DoD puts out. And it is both of our goals is that we touch base with as many small to mid-sized business that needs our service at no cost. And I do want to emphasize that the no cost services it is very important when, you know, it's such valuable information providing. We are all here to assist you and provide the guidance you need to be compliant.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would just underscore again that it's, you know, really one of the things is right that as you know is our a keen focus for the vision that I've given our team, and that is, you know, yes, we are absolutely concerned with compliance. Obviously, that's where we live. That's the environment we're in as it relates, for example, to CMMC being that sort of compliance arm, if you will, of the NIST, you know, 853 sort of parent standards, if you will. But it's this idea though that we really want to be more than just box checkers, right? We want to get the folks that are registered with Project Spectrum. We want to make sure that this is something habitual that is built into the very fabric of how they operate and do business. That is cyber compliance, hygiene, right? Making sure that their infrastructure is tight, making sure that the ways in which they're storing, processing, and transmitting data is in a way that's going to protect their company writ large, irrespective, right? And certainly with cognizant of the requirements required by CMMC, but even broader, just to say, you know what, we're transmitting data. We want to do that in a safe and secure way because we understand the implications to the warfighter. If we're compromised, it's not just my business that might be subject to some ransomware attack or worse, right? Or the shutdown of my company, but it's everybody who I'm doing business with that's then sort of derivatively impacted, right? And so we want to make sure that we understand the fullness and the severity and the seriousness, frankly, of securing our networks and our infrastructure.
Definitely, it is national security, and even more. So from our perspective, where we help so many businesses obtain government contracts, and all of this information being compliant is really just guaranteeing your success as a government contractor.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's certainly checking. It's certainly making sure that the way in which you're handling information is a way and secure, so that you know, those with whom you're invariably going to be engaging with along your contracting journey, that they too can rest assured that any information that's coming to and from your company to them is being done in a secure fashion.
It seems like Mr. Anderson have answered all of the questions in the back end. Looks like we don't have any questions. We talked about everything that we needed to talk. It's such good to see you. And you know, looking forward to more and more such webinars with your organizations, and I hope to see you soon. And I just want to say that thank you everyone for joining us today for another exciting and informative webinar with Connecticut Apex Accelerator. Thank you, Mr. Sykes, for bringing these valuable presentations to our audience. If you have any further questions regarding today's topic, please feel free to contact your CT Apex counselors, and we'll be happy to answer for you. And don't miss out Connecticut Apex upcoming webinars. February 13, prepare for the Department of Defense Mentor Protege Program. March 5th, Foreign Ownership Control or Influence FOCI Rules for Federal Government Contractor. And February 28th, we have small minority business enterprise certifications and SAM registrations hands-on clinic. And please visit the Connecticut Apex calendar page to sign up for all our upcoming events and workshops. You can also find Connecticut Apex training video library at ctptech.org. And everyone have a wonderful day. Thank you again, Mr. Sykes.
Thank you so much. Again, we appreciate the opportunity. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.